Hey everybody, it's Dr. Jess and Paul. This is volume 4 on our series of solving the health puzzle. Why am I sick? The real reasons. Uh, Paul, how you doing?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
Things are going very, very well. I'm having a grand time. I enjoy what I'm doing. What can I say? Uh, Today we're going to talk a little bit about the cell danger response. Paul's been talking about the emotional and psychological and spiritual basis of illness. This gives rise to something that is physical. Okay, the study was done by Dr. Navio, who's an MD PhD at the Metabolic and Mitochondrial Disease Center in the University of Southern California Medical Center of San Diego. In 2013, he wrote a paper called The Cell Danger Response, which showed us what injures a cell, how a cell responds to that injury, protecting itself and you, and how it reasserts its homeostasis, or how it heals itself, and why in chronic illness there's a little glitch in the area, and I'm going to show you. Okay, I'm going to use a couple of panels from one of my lectures, and this I want to tie in what Paul's been talking about the past few weeks, and show you how all these things can injure you at the cellular level. And here's the thing, people. Solving the health puzzle is exactly that. It's a puzzle. But if you use deductive reasoning, in other words, from the outside in, it becomes quite difficult. And the reason I always give my students is that, okay, if somebody comes to you and says, I have nausea, how many things can cause nausea? Okay. If we look at the inside out, which would be inductive reasoning, okay, things become much easier. The example I give people is that if a doctor tells you you have schizophrenia, the first thing in your mind is like, oh my gosh, my life is ruined. I'm going to have to take medicines for the rest of my life. And basically, I'm not going to have a life. Okay. Now, if I look at you and say, all those voices you've been hearing and the hallucinations and so forth, well, they're from chronic brain inflammation created by massive leaky gut syndrome, which happens to be true. And that leaky gut syndrome has been caused by parasites, HHV6, candida, and so forth from the testing we had. The only thing you're going to do is look at me and say, okay, doc, how do we fix it? Now, the first example is an incurable disease. The second example, which is the same exact thing, okay, is a curable entity. The way to think about it is to think from the inside out. What are those things from the inside that can cause the expression you're seeing? So the very basis of this is at the cell, and the very basis of cellular function and dysfunction is rooted in the cell danger response. So I'm going to share my screen with you. Okay, here it is. And this is the cell danger response. I'm going to do the slideshow thingy in a sec here for the current slide. Here we go. Oh, okay, it's working. Now, this is an incredibly complex paper. So a long time ago, a good friend of mine sent me the paper and said, I want you to read this. And I said, okay. He said, I also want you to simplify it, make it understandable. Well, it took me 3 weeks to read the paper. Okay. But here it is. And show this to your friends. The things that injure a cell, okay, are equally chemical and physical, which, as you'd expect, are things like heavy metals, benzene, plastics, heat, salt, shock, radiation, trauma, and so forth. Microbial, again, nobody has an argument about this: mold, fungi, bacteria, viruses, parasites. But in equal measure, all of the psychological, emotional, and spiritual things that are negative can injure the cell just as badly. Yelling, abuse, isolation, abandonment, all the forms of PTSD, non-nurturing childhoods, living with somebody who's consistently badgering you, or anything that causes consistent cycle, either in a single massive event like being in a battle or being raped or something like that, or a consistent negativity will injure the cell just as much as if you swallowed mercury. Okay. What happens when the cell's injured is a cascade of events.
Yeah, sorry, on that, just very quickly, it's rarely just one of those things, by the way.
No, never. It's never.
Right?
It's
It's
never
normally,
one thing.
yeah,
You're
exactly. Right.
absolutely
So
correct.
if you've had a upbringing that's been less than amazing, or an injury or a stress or an event, the likelihood is there's probably some sort of fungal mold issue going on, or heavy metal or something. It's always a combination of things, and you might be able to deal with just one or two of them. Your body might be able to cope with it, but that last straw that gets added on at some point is where it all breaks down, which is why we often, not always, but we often see these things becoming worse as we get older, because we're accumulating more of the problems.
It's exactly true. And one further point is I'm going to show everybody why these things accumulate. Why don't we just heal? Well, when you have a single cell danger response, a single assault, what happens is the cells, particularly the mitochondria, will do several things. And I'm going to make it simple here, okay? It will impede electron flow, which is in the mitochondria. It'll impede oxygen consumption. It'll stiffen up the cell walls. It'll limit vitamin availability, and it'll limit your ability to get rid of heavy metals. Why is it doing that? Because it's trying to kill whatever the invader is. Okay. It also impedes things like redox, lipid dynamics, and so forth. When the danger is over, when they've your body's killed off whatever the offender is, we have a series of anti-inflammatory and regenerative pathways that reboot our cells, reverse the cell danger response, promote healing, and restore the cell's function, which is what's called homeostasis. Okay. What Dr. Navio showed on a scientific basis is that if we have chronic cell danger response, i.e., just what Paul was saying, not an amazing childhood, and adding something else and adding something else and adding something else, that those influences are not additive, they synergize. And don't worry about the fancy name. The chronic CD are interfering with allostatic mechanisms, meaning the process of rebooting. So what's going to happen is you're going to have numerous downstream effects, with those effects like mood disorders and fibromyalgia and CFS and ME, and all these different things are an accumulation of cell danger responses. That your ability to reboot is ineffective. And believe it or not, you can't heal somebody who's in this particular state unless you treat the root causes and the downstream effects. What's the real difference? In medicine today, the concentration is let's get rid of the root causes. So if you have chronic Lyme disease and they eradicate it, let's say you've had Lyme disease for years and they eradicate it, but they don't treat the downstream effects, you're going to still have those symptoms because your cells aren't working. Okay. On the other hand, if you just treat the symptoms and you don't treat the root causes, as if in someone had a chronic seizure disorder that's being semi-controlled by medications, but still has breakthrough seizures, the thinking is not, hey, there are root causes causing this. And that's the problem. If you take care of those root causes and the downstream effects, okay, that person will heal, because what you will do is reverse the cell danger response and allow those cells to become whole again and to become functional again. And by the way, all of this creates the root of all evil, which is not money, by the way. It's the love of money that's the root of all evil, and that is chronic inflammation, okay, which is a subject for another talk, okay? So what Paul said past couple of weeks is a basis of how at the cellular level you begin to become dysfunctional. Add something else or more other things like mold, viruses, another more psychological, emotional, or spiritual events, okay, exposure to toxins and so forth. And eventually those cells will stop will cease their ability to totally heal. This is a reason why you see people with heavy metal burden when they haven't been exposed to heavy metals, because the cells can't kick them out. Okay, this is why you see a lot of things. And the reason that we do foundational treatment that not only looks for root causes, looks to elucidate and eradicate root causes, but looks to identify and correct all the downstream effects. You approach things like this with the knowledge that all of these things have contribution and must be dealt with appropriately for the individual. And then you see healing take place even in the most chronic and multifactorial and conditions you didn't expect to get better. This is why when you employ this tactic or this thought pattern, if you will, people get better.
And by the way, it's the only way for it to work. And there's a couple of things. Firstly, the synergistic thing is about, you might have one or two different elements that are causing the problem, but one and one in that situation makes three. It's bigger than the sum of the parts. It creates a bigger problem. Here's something I've been thinking about this week quite a lot, which I think is relevant. Firstly, to fix that doesn't take you 2 minutes. It takes
No, it doesn't.
months and months of work. You're dealing with a lady at the moment who was having multiple seizures every day, and life was almost over. And then we're about 8 months, a year down the line now.
No, we're about 13 months down the line.
13 months, and she's a completely different woman now. She's
it's amazing. It's amazing
success story, but it takes months, right? Here's the one thing that I wanted to get across in this, because it's so important. People are of the opinion that it should take very little time to fix their health.
Right.
And for me, it's always about, well, what's driving that? Why have you got that short-term perspective? And what I came up with was this analogy. Technology over the last few decades has improved and got so fast, so quickly, that it's unrecognizable. Right? We both remember the 80s and dial-up internet, right, with its noise.
Right, and it took a while, and you were lucky if you got on, right?
You were sitting there waiting for it to happen. Now we have fiber optic, and if it doesn't load within a millisecond, you're on the phone to the provider going, look,
what's going on, right?
But the issue is everything in our life is now being promoted to us as quicker, easier, and no effort on your part. Right? Things that we never believed possible previously about, if you want to do your banking and never walk into a bank, we can do that from your phone. In fact, my bank, and I have several accounts with them for different companies, they don't have branches. It's only virtual.
Right.
When did that start, right? But the fact of the matter is everything moves so very, very fast. So we think everything else should move at that pace. The problem is with our biology, we're running off of 500,000-year-old software, which has never had an update in millennia, right? It's still running off that old process.
This is a BC body in AD time.
And we cannot treat it in the same way as we're treating technology or we're treating the modern pace of life. It does not work. We have to go all the way back to decide, right, we need to take one thing at a time, really slowly, and implement each and every step as we go, because it takes that long for the body to readjust to what you're doing.
That's exactly true.
And when you've got multiple things, that doesn't happen overnight. So it's really important that people get to understand that cell danger response is a natural mechanism that is trying to heal you. But if you're piling in a load of stuff on top of it that you're not aware of, it breaks, because 500,000 years ago, we didn't have most of the problems we've got today.
That's true.
Like you said, we've got a BC body in an AD environment, and this environment is ruining it. And then we put on the worst thing is, well, I should be able to fix that like that. Where's my pill? Where's the thing that will turn it around? And that's a distinction that's really important. And that is exactly what you were saying today, is that you have to deal with all the issues one at a time over a long period. People need to start thinking long periods of time to fix their health. not what can I do in 3 weeks.
Exactly. Exactly. That's, I don't think I could have said it better, because you're absolutely correct. It does take time. It took us a long time to get here. There's a lot of damage. Now, this isn't everybody. There's a certain set of people out there who've been here, there, everywhere, who are not healing, whether the diagnosis is incorrect or the treatment has been suboptimal. Okay, the fact is they're still hurting. So if you wanted to talk to myself or to talk to Paul, all you have to do is go to either one of our websites. So we do offer half-hour get acquainted sessions, and you can ask your questions and see if either one of us can help you. Okay, and if that is good, that is, for almost anything, but especially if you have illnesses that are simply not responding to conventional treatment or even alternative treatment. There's a lot of alternative practitioners that that are giving good care, but they're frustrated with certain types of conditions that simply aren't resolving. This has been a really, really good session. Hopefully I gave you the impression that not only is there a good reason at the cellular level for your continuing symptoms, but there is a way out, okay, given the proper guidance, given the proper mindset. So tell your friends about the podcast. This is volume 4. We're going to be continuing along. Okay. When you see it on YouTube, like it, subscribe. You'll make sure that you get notified of all of our new podcasts coming out. There are loads of things we're going to be imparting to you, and we'll see you again next week at the same time. So you guys take care. Take care, Paul.
All right.
And there's the button.